one with the equipment we've got today. So obviously they, when you think they made about 100,000 of these engines, to keep those sort of tolerances says a lot about the German industry of the 1940s.
1939 saw the RAF with two principal fighters ready for war, each one a classic, the Hawker Hurricane and the Supermarine Spitfire. The Spitfire was the plane that would turn back Goering's Luftwaffe and would pose the greatest challenge to the 109. Both British aircraft were powered by the superb Rolls-Royce Merlin engine. The Hurricane was slow, but its superior range of 600 miles enabled it to stay in the air longer than the 109. The Spitfire, much faster and more maneuverable than its adversary, could not climb as high nor dive as steeply as the German plane. The stage was set for an air war the like of which the world had never seen. On September the 1st, 1939, Germany plunged Europe into war. Over 200 Messerschmitt Bf-109s fanned out over Poland as the spearhead of the Nazi surprise attack. Arguably the best fighter aircraft in existence, they were flown by some of the world's ablest pilots. Honed in combat over Spain, Luftwaffe flyers arrogantly swept over the Polish countryside and decimated everything in their path. Supporting the ground forces storming through Polish territory, the Luftwaffe was confronted by about 300 enemy aircraft. Many were caught on the ground, helpless against the German juggernaut. The Poles mounted a heroic defense, but it was in vain. By the time the smoke had cleared, the Polish Air Force had ceased to exist. Smashed and strewn across the land it was meant to protect. The Luftwaffe lost less than 80 aircraft. The story was the same across the rest of Europe. Norway, Holland, Belgium, and France were engulfed by the relentless tide of German armies. Above them was the ever-present 109, an umbrella of steel ensuring air superiority every step of the way. By June 1940, the British Expeditionary Force sent to assist the French was trapped and in desperate straits. Although the miracle at Dunkirk saved nearly 350,000 Allied troops, the price paid during the evacuation was high. 44,000 British and French soldiers were killed or captured. Above the beaches, Messerschmitt 109s had a field day. With France's defeat, Germany turned its attention to Britain. Goering vowed to bring the island nation to its knees and initiated daytime bombing raids over England. The bomber's primary escort was the 109. Told by RAF Commander Hugh Dowding that, quote, "The fate of generations lies in your hands," British pilots in Spitfires and Hurricanes hurled themselves against the incoming enemy. Hitler announced, "I prophesy that a great empire will be destroyed." In spite of the Führer's optimism, however, the 109's weakness became painfully clear. With a cruising range of just 410 miles, pilots had only 20 minutes fighting time against the enemy. Of 12 109s returning from one mission, 5 barely crash-landed onto French soil, and the other 7 ditched in the Channel. Although the British had far more Hurricane fighters in service, early on RAF pilots learned to set these slower planes against enemy bombers, while the faster Spitfires kept the 109s busy, thus burning up their precious fuel. Luftwaffe ace General Dieter Hrabach flew the 109 over Britain.
The Battle of Britain was more or less influenced by higher commands, and we couldn't do what we wanted. We were ordered what to do, and that was mostly escort missions above and around the bombers. An escort work meant, especially the close escort, that you lose any of the advantages of a fighter pilot, that is speed, that is altitude, and even the turn ability. You have to fix your speed and the altitude to the bombers. They are considerably slower than 109.
Certainly the short-range 109s were badly handicapped as bomber escorts. But in the face of tragic losses, they held on to one distinct advantage. With a ceiling 2,000 feet higher than the Spitfires, they could dive onto unsuspecting British pilots at will. Then, when the more powerful 109F came out, the odds improved markedly in their favor. Learning from the Germans, British pilots quickly abandoned wingtip formations and flew in looser groupings for more freedom of maneuver and greater range of vision. With their limited range, Luftwaffe flyers in 109s would often venture alone over the Channel to lure foolhardy RAF pilots back to waiting comrades circling near the French coast. RAF pilots flew as many as 7 sorties a day. The fate of men on both sides was decided in missions where the period of actual combat seldom lasted more than 15 minutes. Collectively, these desperate, brief clashes between men and their machines determined the fate of a nation. Although some German flyers considered the Spitfire more maneuverable, British pilots who flew captured MUs, as Luftwaffe airmen sometimes called their 109s, judged the two a very close match. General Dieter Hrabach was more than just a pilot. He was also a trainer and mentor to the Luftwaffe flyers in his command. His job was to combine and hone man and machine to a single purpose.
Each pilot had his own aircraft. If it was not available, then he could take and substitute. But normally he has his own aircraft. And with his own aircraft, he had his own first mechanic, his own second mechanic. And normally, you know, we had in Germany this four aircraft. We call it Schwarm. These 4 aircraft, to this, they belong always the same man responsible for the weapons, and 1 man who will be always the same for hydraulics. So this crew belonged together, these 4 aircraft, 4 pilots, and the mechanics on the ground, they were flying with their pilots when their aircraft went away, hoping and wishing and praying for that he comes back, and maybe comes back successfully.
The man in this aircraft was successful. Not only was he an excellent fighter pilot, but he possessed natural leadership qualities which came to the fore during his service in Spain. Ultimately, this led to his appointment as General of Fighters. Werner Mölders was an inspiration to young pilots. Although Mölders answered only to Goering, he distanced himself from the high command, preferring instead to be with his men. This devout Catholic was not ashamed to say he often experienced fear before combat, and the shock that always followed. A flyer first and a general second, he did much to revive the spirit of Richthofen. But by 1941, Hitler had embarked on his fatal invasion of Russia. Returning from the Eastern Front and far from the enemy guns, Werner Mölders' transport aircraft crashed. Germany had lost one of her first true heroes of the war. The nation mourned as its general of fighters was laid to rest. But another great ace was to replace Mölders. His name was Adolf Galland. He too had flown in Spain, and 94 enemy pilots had fallen to his guns. He's seen here on the extreme right.
He was a very, very experienced pilot and leader in the air, which is not always identical. We have a lot of solo pilots. They're great shooters, but never can lead a unit in the air. You know, they are solo fighters. Gallant was a